What's the best way you've seen someone rebel against school rules? When I was 16, our principal, Mrs. Hartley, implemented the most ridiculous dress code policy I'd ever seen. Girls couldn't wear anything that showed shoulders, knees, or collarbones. Tank tops were banned. Shorts had to reach mid-thigh. Even our school's own cheerleading uniforms violated the new rules. But the real kicker? Boys could wear whatever they wanted. Muscle shirts, shorts that barely covered anything, even shirtless during PE right outside our classroom windows. When girls complained, Mrs. Hartley's response was always the same. Young ladies must dress appropriately to avoid distracting their male classmates. My best friend Zara had enough when she got sent home for wearing a sundress on a 95-degree day. The straps were 3 fingers wide, well within the old guidelines, but apparently showed too much shoulder. Meanwhile, Trevor sat behind us in a tank top that barely qualified as fabric. "This is insane," Zara fumed as we sat in her car. "I'm missing my calculus exam because of 2 inches of shoulder." That's when she hatched the most brilliant plan I'd ever witnessed. Zara spent the entire weekend researching the school board's policies, state education codes, and federal discrimination laws. She discovered something interesting. The dress code policy had never been officially voted on by the school board. Mrs. Hartley had implemented it unilaterally, which violated district protocol. Monday morning, Zara walked into school wearing the exact same sundress that got her sent home. When Mrs. Hartley spotted her in the hallway, her face turned purple. "Miss Rodriguez, I told you that dress is inappropriate. Report to the office immediately." Zara smiled sweetly. "Actually, Mrs. Hartley, I need to discuss something with you first." She pulled out a thick folder and handed Mrs. Hartley a document. "This is a formal complaint filed with the school board regarding your unauthorized dress code policy. I've also sent copies to the district superintendent and the state's Department of Education." Mrs. Hartley's eyes widened as she scanned the papers. "You see," Zara continued, her voice carrying down the hallway as students gathered to watch, "implementing policy changes without board approval violates District Code 47B. Also, enforcing different standards based on gender constitutes discrimination under Title IX." Mrs. Hartley tried to interrupt, but Zara wasn't finished. "I've documented 47 instances in the past month where boys violated what would be equivalent dress code standards, while girls were punished for similar or less revealing clothing. I have photos, witness statements, and a timeline showing the pattern of discriminatory enforcement." The hallway was packed now. Students were pulling out phones, recording everything. "Furthermore," Zara said, her voice getting stronger, "I've contacted the local news station. They're very interested in a story about a school administrator who thinks girls' shoulders are more distracting than boys' education." Mrs. Hartley's face went from purple to white. "Miss Rodriguez, we can discuss this privately in my office." "No need," Zara replied. "I've also organized a peaceful protest for this Friday. Every girl who's been dress coded this year will be wearing the exact outfit that got them in trouble. We're calling it Shoulders Out for Education." She turned to address the crowd of students now surrounding them. "Ladies, wear whatever got you sent home. Tank tops, sundresses, shorts that actually fit your body. We're going to show this administration that our education is more important than their obsession with our clothes." The crowd erupted in cheers. Girls were already pulling out their phones, texting, planning. Mrs. Hartley looked panicked. "You can't organize protests on school property. That's against—" "Actually," Zara interrupted, pulling out another document. "Peaceful protest is protected under the First Amendment, and student expression is specifically protected under Tinker v. Des Moines. As long as we're not disrupting the educational environment, we have every right to express ourselves." She paused for effect. "Unlike your dress code policy, my protest is actually legal." Mrs. Hartley tried to grab the folder from Zara's hands, but Zara stepped back. "These are copies. The originals are already with the school board. Oh, and Mrs. Hartley, Channel 7 News will be here Friday morning to cover our peaceful demonstration." With that, Zara walked past Mrs. Hartley toward her first period class, her sundress flowing behind her like a victory flag. But what happened next was even better than any of us could have imagined. The moment Zara disappeared into her classroom, Mrs. Hartley's facade completely crumbled. She stood in the middle of the hallway, clutching Zara's documents with trembling hands while students streamed past her, whispering and pointing. I watched from my locker as she frantically speed-dialed someone on her phone. "This is an emergency," she hissed into the receiver. "I need the school board chairman on the line immediately. We have a situation." By lunch, the entire school was buzzing. Word had spread through every classroom, every lunch table, every corner where students gathered. The group chat Zara created had exploded to over 300 members within 2 hours. Girls were sharing photos of the outfits that had gotten them in trouble, comparing stories of humiliation and missed class time. I found Zara in the library during our free period, surrounded by a mountain of printed documents and legal codes. She looked up when I approached, her eyes bright with determination. "Did you know," she said without preamble, "that our school receives federal funding? That means they're legally required to follow Title IX guidelines. Mrs. Hartley's dress code isn't just discriminatory, it's potentially illegal under federal law." She showed me a highlighted section of text on her laptop screen. "Look at this case from Wisconsin. A school district had to pay $75,000 in damages for enforcing gender discriminatory dress codes. $75,000. You think they'll change the policy to avoid a lawsuit?" I asked. Zara's smile was sharp. "I think they're going to panic when they realize how much legal trouble they're in." As if summoned by her words, Mrs. Hartley appeared at the library entrance, flanked by the school's guidance counselor, Mrs. Fletcher. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Zara. "Miss Rodriguez," she called out, her voice echoing through the quiet library, "I need to speak with you immediately." Every student in the library looked up. The librarian, Mrs. Kim, frowned at the disruption. Zara calmly saved her work and closed her laptop. Of course, Mrs. Hartley. Would you like to discuss your illegal dress code policy here, or should we go somewhere more private? Mrs. Hartley's face flushed red. My office, now. Actually, Zara said, standing and gathering her documents, I think we should have this conversation in the presence of witnesses. And I'd like to record it for my legal documentation. She pulled out her phone and opened the voice recording app. Mrs. Fletcher, you're welcome to stay as a neutral observer. Mrs. Hartley looked trapped. Students were openly staring now, some pulling out their own phones to record. Fine, Mrs. Hartley snapped. But this conversation is happening in my office, and there will be no recording. Then there will be no conversation, Zara replied smoothly. My lawyer advised me to document all interactions regarding this discrimination case. The word lawyer hit Mrs. Hartley like a physical blow. I watched her face cycle through surprise, fear, and rage before settling on barely controlled panic. You don't have a lawyer, she said, but her voice wavered. Zara smiled and pulled out a business card. Rodriguez and Associates. My uncle specializes in civil rights law. He's very interested in this case. Mrs. Hartley stared at the card like it might explode. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Zara's uncle was indeed a lawyer, but he usually handled divorce cases and traffic tickets. Still, Mrs. Hartley didn't need to know that. Furthermore, Zara continued, I've been in contact with the American Civil Liberties Union. They're considering taking this case pro bono as part of their student rights initiative. This was news to me, but Mrs. Hartley looked like she might faint. Mrs. Fletcher stepped forward nervously. Perhaps we should all take a step back and discuss this calmly. I am calm, Zara said. I'm also prepared. Mrs. Hartley, you have until Friday to either reinstate the previous dress code or explain to Channel 7 News why you think girls' shoulders are more dangerous than boys' education. With that, she packed up her materials and walked out of the library, leaving Mrs. Hartley standing speechless among the bookshelves. That afternoon, I drove Zara home and watched as she transformed her bedroom into a war room. She had research printouts taped to the walls, a timeline of discriminatory incidents mapped out on a whiteboard, and multiple laptops running simultaneously. How long have you been planning this? I asked, amazed by the scope of her preparation. Since the first day she implemented the policy, Zara admitted. I started documenting everything immediately. Every girl who got dress coded, every boy who was ignored for wearing something equivalent, every time Mrs. Hartley made a comment about distracting the boys, she showed me a spreadsheet with dozens of entries. Look at this pattern. Ashley got sent home for wearing a tank top on September 3rd. Same day, Brandon wore a muscle shirt that showed his entire torso. No consequences. Mia got detention for shorts that showed her knees on September 10th. Jeremy wore shorts so short you could see his boxers. Nothing. The data was overwhelming and undeniable. But the real smoking gun, Zara continued, opening another file, was this email. She showed me a printed message from Mrs. Hartley to the faculty. The subject line read, maintaining appropriate standards for our young ladies. The content was even worse. Mrs. Hartley had written paragraphs about how girls needed to respect themselves and their male classmates by dressing modestly. She emphasized that boys were naturally distracted by female bodies, and that it was girls' responsibility to help boys focus on their education. She sent this to 23 teachers, Zara said. Not one of them reported it as inappropriate. That's 24 school employees complicit in gender discrimination. My stomach twisted as I read the email. This is disgusting. It's also evidence, Zara said grimly. Evidence that the discrimination was intentional and systemic. That evening, my phone rang. It was my older sister, who had graduated from our school 3 years earlier. Is it true that Zara Rodriguez is taking on Mrs. Hartley? She asked without preamble. How did you hear about that? It's all over social media. Your shoulders out for education is trending. Girls from 6 different schools have reached out asking how to organize their own protests. I looked at the hashtag on my phone and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Hundreds of posts from students sharing their own dress code horror stories. Photos of girls in perfectly appropriate clothing who had been humiliated and sent home. Screenshots of hypocritical policies that targeted female students. This is bigger than just our school, my sister continued. Zara might have started a movement. Tuesday morning brought the first cracks in Mrs. Hartley's authority. I arrived at school to find her standing in the main entrance with a measuring tape, physically checking the length of girls' shorts and skirts as they entered the building. The sight was both pathetic and infuriating. A grown woman crouched on the floor, measuring teenage girls' clothing, while male students walked past unchecked. This is harassment, said Carmen, a senior who had never been in trouble in her life. I'm calling my mom. You're required to follow the dress code, Mrs. Hartley snapped, not looking up from her tape measure. Show me where this measurement requirement is written in the official policy, Carmen shot back. Mrs. Hartley paused. It's implied. No, it's not, said another voice. Zara appeared beside us, once again carrying her folder of documentation. The official dress code, which was approved by the school board in 2019, contains no specific measurement. It simply states that clothing should be appropriate for the educational environment. She pulled out a copy of the actual policy and held it up. There's nothing in here about fingertip length, shoulder coverage, or any of the arbitrary rules you've been enforcing. A crowd was gathering. Students pulled out phones, recording Mrs. Hartley kneeling on the floor with a measuring tape while Zara calmly read from the official policy. Furthermore, Zara continued, physically measuring students' clothing could constitute inappropriate contact with minors. I'm sure the school board would be very interested to know that you're touching students without their consent. Mrs. Hartley dropped the measuring tape like it was on fire. I was just ensuring compliance with a policy that doesn't exist, Zara finished. Mrs. Hartley, you're making rules up as you go along, and then enforcing them exclusively on female students. That's the definition of discrimination. By this point, half the school was watching. Teachers had emerged from their classrooms to see what was happening. Even Mr. Peterson, the football coach who usually avoided drama, was staring in shock. Mrs. Hartley stood up, her face red with embarrassment and anger. "Miss Rodriguez, report to my office immediately." "For what violation?" Zara asked calmly. Mrs. Hartley sputtered. "Insubordination. I haven't been insubordinate. I've been factual. I'm wearing clothing that complies with the official school dress code. I'm speaking respectfully to a school administrator. I'm exercising my right to free speech in a non-disruptive manner." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If you want to discipline me for reading the official school policy out loud, that's your choice. But I should mention that my uncle's law firm is very interested in retaliation cases." Mrs. Hartley looked around at the crowd of students and teachers, all watching her every move. Some were openly recording. Others were texting frantically. "Everyone get to class," she said weakly. "The bell is about to ring." "The bell doesn't ring for another 8 minutes," pointed out Derek, checking his phone. "And we have the right to be in the hallways until then." Mrs. Hartley turned and walked quickly toward her office, leaving the measuring tape on the floor. A freshman girl picked it up and handed it to Zara with a grin. "Think you'll need this for evidence?" she asked. Zara smiled. "Absolutely." Wednesday brought reinforcements. I arrived at school to find Zara standing outside the main entrance with 2 adults I didn't recognize. One was a middle-aged woman with a professional camera, and the other was a young man with a notebook. "Local news?" I asked. "Better," Zara replied. "The woman is from the State Department of Education. They received my complaint and decided to conduct a surprise inspection. The man is from the ACLU's Student Rights Division." My jaw dropped. "You actually got the ACLU involved?" Turns out they've been looking for a good test case for gender discriminatory dress codes. Our school's policy is so blatantly illegal that they jumped at the chance to take it on. The Department of Education investigator, who introduced herself as Ms. Patterson, was already taking notes about the school's entrance policies. The ACLU representative, Jordan McKnight, was interviewing students about their experiences with the dress code. "Can you describe what happened when you were sent home for wearing this outfit?" Jordan asked a junior named Alexis, who was wearing a perfectly normal sleeveless blouse. "Mrs. Hartley said my shoulders were inappropriate and distracting," Alexis explained. "She made me call my mom to bring different clothes. I missed my AP chemistry exam because my mom was at work and couldn't come until after lunch." Jordan made notes. "And you've seen male students wear similar or more revealing clothing without consequences." "Every day," Alexis replied. "The boy who sits next to me in chemistry wore a tank top so cut up you could see his entire torso. Nothing happened to him." Ms. Patterson emerged from the school building looking grim. "I've reviewed the policy documents," she announced. "The current dress code being enforced was never submitted to the school board for approval, which violates state education code. Additionally, the enforcement patterns show clear gender bias, which violates federal anti-discrimination laws." She turned to Zara. "Miss Rodriguez, your documentation is extremely thorough. This is one of the clearest cases of educational discrimination I've seen." Mrs. Hartley chose that moment to exit the building. She stopped dead when she saw the investigators. "Who are you?" she demanded. "You need to sign in at the office before—" "I'm Ms. Patterson from the State Department of Education," the investigator replied coolly. "We're conducting an unannounced compliance review based on a discrimination complaint." "And you are?" "Principal Hartley," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "Perfect. I need to speak with you about your dress code policies. Specifically, about the unauthorized changes you've made and the discriminatory enforcement patterns." Mrs. Hartley glanced around desperately, as if looking for an escape route. "There must be some misunderstanding. Our dress code is perfectly reasonable." Jordan McKnight stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm with the American Civil Liberties Union. We're investigating allegations of gender-based discrimination in your dress code enforcement. Would you care to comment on why male students are allowed to wear revealing clothing while female students are punished for showing their shoulders?" Mrs. Hartley's face went white. We don't. The policies apply to everyone equally." "Do they?" Ms. Patterson asked, pulling out a thick folder. "Because I have documentation of 47 incidents where female students were disciplined for dress code violations, while male students wearing similar or more revealing clothing faced no consequences." She opened the folder and showed Mrs. Hartley photographs side by side, girls in tank tops next to boys in muscle shirts, girls in knee-length shorts next to boys in shorter athletic shorts. "Can you explain this discrepancy?" Ms. Patterson asked. Mrs. Hartley stared at the photos, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Boys don't— Their clothing isn't what?" Jordan pressed. "Distracting? Inappropriate? Are you saying that male bodies are inherently less sexualized than female bodies?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. "That's not what I meant," Mrs. Hartley said desperately. "Then what did you mean?" Ms. Patterson asked. "Because based on your enforcement patterns, it appears you believe that girls' shoulders, knees, and collarbones are inappropriate for the educational environment, while boys' exposed torsos, arms, and legs are perfectly acceptable." A crowd of students had gathered to watch the confrontation. Many were recording on their phones. Mrs. Hartley seemed to realize that everything she said was being documented. "I think I should consult with the school district's legal team before answering any more questions," she said carefully. "That's probably wise," Jordan agreed, "because this case is heading to federal court, and your answers today could be used as evidence." The words "federal court" hit Mrs. Hartley like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, then turned and fled into the building. Ms. Patterson watched her go with a mixture of professional disappointment and personal disgust. "In 20 years of investigating school discrimination cases," she said to Zara, "I've rarely seen such blatant policy violations. You've built an airtight case." Thursday brought chaos. Word had leaked that the state was investigating the school for discrimination. Parents were calling the district office demanding answers. Local news vans were parked outside the school. The hashtag #IShutJarj Shoulders Out for Education was trending nationally, and Mrs. Hartley was nowhere to be found. "She called in sick," announced Mrs. Peterson, the vice principal, during morning announcements. "I'll be serving as acting principal for the remainder of the week." The relief in the building was palpable. Mrs. Peterson was beloved by students and known for her fair, common-sense approach to discipline. I found Zara at her locker looking oddly subdued for someone who had just toppled a tyrant. "You did it," I said. "You actually won." Zara shook her head. "It's not over yet. Mrs. Hartley could come back. The school board could reinstate her. The district could find ways to retaliate. But you have the state and the ACLU on your side now. For this case, yes. But what about the next school? The next principal? The next group of girls who get told their bodies are inappropriate?" I realized then that Zara wasn't just fighting for our school. She was fighting for a principle, for the idea that students have rights that adults can't arbitrarily take away. That afternoon, the school board called an emergency meeting. It was open to the public, and the auditorium was packed with students, parents, and community members. The board chairman, Dr. Williams, looked deeply uncomfortable as he addressed the crowd. "We've received reports of irregularities in the dress code policies at Jefferson High School," he began carefully. "We want to assure everyone that the board takes these allegations seriously." "What are you going to do about it?" called out a parent from the audience. Dr. Williams cleared his throat. "We're conducting a full investigation. Any policies that weren't properly approved will be rescinded. Any disciplinary actions taken under invalid policies will be reversed." "What about Mrs. Hartley?" another voice demanded. "Personnel matters are confidential," Dr. Williams replied. "But I can say that any administrator found to have violated district policies or state law will face appropriate consequences." Zara stood up in the audience. "Dr. Williams, I'd like to read a statement on behalf of the students affected by these discriminatory policies." Dr. Williams looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but he nodded. "The board recognizes Miss Rodriguez." Zara walked to the podium with a confidence that belied her 17 years. She had prepared remarks, but she set them aside and spoke from the heart. "For 3 months, girls at Jefferson High have been told that their bodies are inappropriate for education. We've been measured, inspected, and humiliated. We've missed classes, exams, and opportunities because administrators were more concerned with our clothing than our learning." The auditorium was completely silent. But this isn't just about dress codes. It's about respect. It's about treating students as human beings with rights, not objects to be controlled. It's about recognizing that girls deserve the same educational opportunities as boys, without being told that our very existence is a distraction. She paused, looking directly at the board members. "You have the power to ensure this never happens again, not just in our school, but in every school in this district. You can implement policies that protect students from discrimination. You can require training for administrators on constitutional rights and gender equity. You can make it clear that students' education comes before adults' discomfort with teenage bodies." The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous crescendo. People were standing, cheering, some wiping away tears. Dr. Williams waited for the noise to die down before responding. "Miss Rodriguez, the board appreciates your passion on this issue. We will take your recommendations under advisement." "Don't just take them under advisement," Zara replied firmly. "Act on them, because if you don't, we will. Students across this district are watching to see whether you'll protect our rights or protect the administrators who violated them." She returned to her seat, leaving the board members looking shell-shocked. Friday morning arrived like a celebration. The protest was scheduled for 7:30 a.m. before classes started, but students began gathering at 7 a.m. By 7:15, the parking lot was filled with girls wearing tank tops, sleeveless dresses, shorts, and all the other clothing that had been deemed inappropriate. But it wasn't just girls. Boys showed up wearing the revealing clothing they'd never been punished for: muscle shirts, short shorts, tank tops cut so low they barely qualified as clothing. The contrast was striking and intentional. Channel 7's news van pulled up right on schedule, followed by vehicles from 3 other local stations and 2 newspapers. Diana Walsh stepped out with her camera crew, surveying the crowd with obvious satisfaction. "This is even bigger than we expected," she told Zara. "We've been getting calls from news outlets across the country wanting to cover this story." The crowd had grown to over 200 students, plus parents, teachers, and community members. Someone had made a banner reading "Education Over Regulation" that stretched across the school's entrance. At exactly 7:30, the main doors opened and Mrs. Peterson emerged. Unlike Mrs. Hartley's hostile confrontations, Mrs. Peterson was smiling. "Good morning, everyone," she called out cheerfully. "I want you to know that effective immediately, Jefferson High's dress code has returned to the board-approved guidelines. Any student disciplined under the unauthorized policy will have those incidents removed from their records." The crowd erupted in cheers. "Furthermore," Mrs. Peterson continued, "the district has announced new training requirements for all administrators on student rights and anti-discrimination policies, and I'm pleased to announce that Jefferson High will be hosting a student rights workshop next month, led by the ACLU and featuring Ms. Rodriguez as a student panelist." More cheers, louder this time. Diana Walsh stepped forward with her microphone. "Mrs. Peterson, can you comment on Mrs. Hartley's status?" Mrs. Peterson's smile became more diplomatic. Mrs. Hartley is no longer employed by this district. I've been appointed as the permanent principal of Jefferson High. The cheers turned into a roar. Students were hugging, crying, celebrating like they'd won the lottery. But the best moment came when Mr. Campbell, the district superintendent, arrived unexpectedly. He made his way through the crowd to where Zara was standing. "Miss Rodriguez," he said, extending his hand. "On behalf of the district, I want to apologize for what you and your fellow students endured. Your advocacy has not only corrected an injustice, but has made our entire district stronger." He paused, looking at the crowd of celebrating students. "I also want to offer you an internship with our district's policy review committee. We could use someone with your research skills and passion for student rights." Zara's eyes widened. "Seriously? Seriously? You've shown more leadership and legal understanding than some administrators twice your age. We'd be honored to have you help us ensure this never happens again." As news crews captured the moment, I realized I was witnessing something historic. Not just the end of a discriminatory policy, but the beginning of a movement that would spread far beyond our small school. The story went viral that weekend. Shoulders Out for Education became a global hashtag, with students from dozens of countries sharing their own dress code stories. Zara was invited to speak at conferences, interviewed by national news outlets, and offered scholarships to several universities. But more importantly, schools across the country began reviewing their own policies. Districts in 12 states changed their dress codes within a month. The Department of Education issued new guidelines on gender discriminatory policies, and the ACLU launched a nationwide initiative to protect student rights. Mrs. Hartley never worked in education again. Last I heard, she was selling real estate in Florida, probably measuring square footage with the same obsessive attention to detail she'd once applied to teenage girls' clothing. 2 years later, when Zara graduated as valedictorian, her speech focused on the power of individual action to create systemic change. "They told us we were just students," she said, looking out at the audience. "They told us to follow the rules without questioning them. They told us that our education was less important than their comfort with our bodies." She paused, smiling at the crowd. "They were wrong. Students have power. We have rights. And when we stand together, we can change the world, one discriminatory policy at a time." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Today, Zara is in her 3rd year at Harvard Law School, specializing in civil rights and education law. She still keeps that original folder of documents as a reminder of what one person with determination and a thorough understanding of the law can accomplish. The school now has a permanent display in the main hallway, featuring photos from the protest, copies of the legal documents, and a timeline of the policy changes that resulted. New students learn the story as part of their orientation. It's a reminder that authority without accountability is tyranny, that students aren't just bodies to be controlled but citizens with rights, and that sometimes the most powerful rebellion isn't breaking the rules, it's knowing them better than the people trying to enforce them. And every August, when news stories surface about new dress code controversies in schools across the country, I think about that Friday morning when 200 students stood in a parking lot and said, "Enough." Sometimes change doesn't require violence or destruction. Sometimes it just requires one person brave enough to say, "This is wrong," and smart enough to prove it. Mrs. Hartley learned that lesson the hard way. The rest of us learned it the right way, by watching Zara Rodriguez prove that students' voices matter, that justice can prevail, and that a sundress can be a weapon of mass instruction. The revolution wasn't televised. It was live-streamed, hashtagged, and thoroughly documented for the federal discrimination lawsuit that settled for an undisclosed amount. And it all started with a girl who refused to let anyone tell her that her shoulders were more dangerous than her mind.